All right. We are living in trying times right now. Difficult times, I guess you could say, as we continue to try and get through this global crisis. This is now the beginning, the first week, the second day of a shelter-in-place ordinance that's been issued here where I live. Um, some other states, California, New York, they've been in it for what's going to be the second week. And an interesting thing is the way that people are trying to preserve the essence of normalcy, essentially, in daily life. As nothing is normal. Kids that are home instead of going to school, and you gotta maybe you can't go to work, or you have to go to work in spite of this thing that's going on, and kids are potentially being left home unattended, turned into latchkeys that weren't really planned on. Like, there's so many things happening, and people are just having to adapt, and they didn't necessarily have a contingency for. And in one way that's really evident is our church culture. See, churches are now having to scramble, essentially, in order to try and figure out a way to have church without having church buildings, that to have access to the level of kind of shelter that they had before. That some are doing like a drive-in movie theater kind of thing, some are live stream only, some are just, listen, we're just shut down, that's it. And some are doing small group, cell group, in-home style, kind of decentralized things. Like there's an interesting, like there's a force of creativity present that wasn't in just a couple of weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, in Christian culture. That's good to see. That as a believer, I'm like, it's good to see people Christians are not lauded in today's society, or even the past couple of generations, as being on the cutting edge of creativity and innovation. But you have, in this instance, that you're starting to see them flex a little, and that's good to see. However, I think that we do need to really kind of deal with the idea of what if normal isn't coming. Like, we're trying to preserve an illusion of normalcy through this process, but reality is, what if normal isn't coming back to us? When after the disease is gone, people are back to work wholesale, the restaurants and the grocery stores are no longer pillaged and whatever. Like, once that's the case, will we be able to go back to these large building formats again? Not just simply because, like, thinking the government's going to oppress us. I'm not going there. What I'm thinking is, will people desire these gigantic gatherings when they realized how really an obstacle that is towards them having emotional and spiritual support in a crisis? And I think maybe not. See, in our side, like, we consider the multi-site, the mega church, the mega church, whatever, that's normal for us now. That's ordinary. That's common. That's if somebody's going to plant a church, they're either going to plant it as a multi-site, or they're going to plant it as with the expectation that it's going to explode and that they're going to get maybe 2,000-3,000 if you're in the right area, maybe 5,000-10,000, and that when it's time for you to grow, you're just going to split off and you're going to have a multi-site campus, or you're like, It's just that's the assumed model now. And my question is that what is normal? And I think if you look at church history, you will find that the answer is a clear no. And that for now generations, even though what's considered normal, common, is considered normal, really, I would challenge the question of, yeah, you went to a building, but did you go to church? That, I mean, in Acts 2, when the church is born, Acts 3, like, when you see them as they start going on missionary journeys and things, that you don't see them doing multi-site. You don't see them doing mega churches. Actually, describes them as going house to house, like a small group, like a cell group, whatever, like that kind of a situation, breaking bread, eating together, and that, yes, like you have Paul, you go to the Areopagus, the lecture hall of Tyrannus, but they would go to the synagogues, the places of major gathering for the religious people, religious adjacent people, and then when they were expelled from those areas, then they would go to the overtly pagan areas, and then they would go there for the purpose of evangelism and apologetics, and being that as they did so, that those people would be drawn in, and that they would, as they received the gospel, they would join the house-to-house churches that were meeting and breaking bread and sharpening each other's iron. Like, that's the way it's always been. And that we've fallen in love with this idea of that the church is the center of the town, and it's not that anymore. And quite honestly, we've never really recovered ideologically or methodologically from that loss. We still think if you build it, they'll come to us, and they're just not gonna. And now we have this situation of that now people have this overt excuse to not go to church, and guess what? They're taking it. They're just not interested in going, like, and for people like me, where I have a high, like, I have podcasts and stuff, like, I consume a lot more preaching than most people probably do. I'm like, man, we're in a crisis, and so I'm adding podcasts so I can get more in, because I know that I'm not going to be able to the way that I had been before. So it's just something to consider. Challenge, I guess, your definition of what is normal for the church is really the point that I'm trying to make, and what you can do to become more part of, like, a decentralized, maybe like once this is over, or maybe even now, like, hey, inviting people in, sharing your resources, and as much as you can, connecting with the people from your church. Like, there's so many things that can be done as well. Just from the conveyance of technology, the convenience of technology that we have. There's no excuse to not being connected with God's people, even right now. It's just not going to look the way your comfort-centric mindset is going to allow.